Make them wait for it. Boom. In the chaos, danger, and constant threat of death in the worlds of FromSoftware games, there has always existed small pockets of quiet, somber refuge. Places where NPCs gather to take shelter, where players can level up, learn lore, or take a breath. Whether it's the melancholic serenity of Firelink Shrine or Medulla, the ethereal comforts of the Hunter's Dream, the quiet safety of the Nexus or Kuro's Room, or the warmth of the Round Table Hold, each Souls game offers us a home. But beyond these central hubs, there are hidden places of unexpected peace. Elden Ring's full of them, but few have captured players' hearts quite like the topic of today's video, the Church of Vows. For one reason, and one reason alone. There's a turtle in a Pope hat. So let's go to church. I can't believe I spent money on this for that. Hopefully I kept the tag for this. Jesus Christ.
To get started on this build, we need to start mapping out the walls on some graph paper. To get it as accurate to the in-game design as possible, I hopped into the game to have a little wander around the church to take some screen grabs from inside and out. With the screen grabs in hand, I can get some accurate-ish sketches put to paper, and we'll end up with a whole bunch of different ruined church wall designs, which I can then cut out to give us the design foundation to build from. Then, with some thin sheets of XPS foam, I'll cut around the paper sketches with a hobby knife and we'll get a bunch of very basic looking blue walls. To start adding the bricks into these walls, I'll score some lines into the foam with a pencil. It's a much quicker method than using individual bricks, especially as we have so many walls to do both inside and out. With the lines drawn in, I want to add some beveling to the edges of them as bricks don't tend to be totally sharp, especially on ruins. So I'll use this clay shaper tool to widen the gaps and soften the edges. I'll use the same tool to squash some bricks down and add some general wear and tear to roughen up the wall and give it a bit of a broken, ruined texture. This also helps add depth to the flat foam, so it doesn't look like a boring flat slab with some lines drawn on it. With our broken wall, we need to add some rocky texture to it, and we can do that with some balled up foil and roll it all over. And there's one basic ruined wall ready to go. The next step is to make some little pillars and extra little wall sections to it to bulk it up and add some more depth, and just follow the same steps as before, scoring, beveling and weathering. Then it should start to look a bit more like the original sketch I had whipped up. Then it's the lengthy process of repeating all those steps over and again to create all the walls we need for the whole church. Now, a ruined church wall isn't complete without windows, big Gothic windows. Or in this case, just the window frames, as all the glass has been long gone at this point. So I printed this cool Gothic frame, and then printed a whole bunch more varying sizes and designs to match the measurements of my sketches. I just need to cut around the edges of the frames on the foam with my knife to create little window pockets for them to slot into. And we have ourselves a pretty cool looking church wall. Just need to add a couple more extra wall gubbins to beef it out. Then, to make the curved arches above the frames, I can take thin strips of foam and gently bend them into an arch, glue it down with PVA and pop some pins in to hold them in shape. Then keep repeating the steps again and again and again, adding the windows, extra little stanchions and wall reinforcements for depth and interest. For the front wall, I need a deep set archway door. So I'll add a few different thin strips of foam to build up the depth of the door and hold them all into place with a couple more pins. Then pop a couple windows and some broken ones in, and above the door arch I can add a couple little tiles to the sloped roof and finish off with some random little blocks of foam on the arch for some added door stuff. I wanted some pillars for the insides of the walls, so I went and bought some of these wooden ribbed dowels, which I cut to size and can glue in place in between the windows. Then add some more thin sheets of foam with some brick designs on it for some extra pillar depth. Sometimes when bending the foam it can break, but to be honest it kind of works in your favour if that happens, as that's just free wear and tear texturing. I need some nice little pointy arch bits to sit above the windows in between the pillars, so I'll cut some thin arch shapes out, then cut into them to create this little step look for an added bit of interest. I'll pop them all in place and we've got some fun looking inner walls. And after a long time of building out a bunch of different walls, we finally have the general foundation of the church completed. In total, we have a small collection of 8 different walls with a design on the front and back, so I'm going to call that 16 walls to soothe my YouTubing ego. In the centre of the church, we also have these freestanding broken pillar arches. So I'll repeat a bunch of the previous steps and create 3 broken arches. I'll attach some pillar tops and bottoms to either side of some ribbed dowels and glue the broken arches to the top. Then we'll end up with a lovely set of broken archways. At the back of the church are a bunch of statues which I went and 3D printed. This main one in the pool that absolves you of all your debauchery, and these torch-wielding hooded statues that stand in front of the windows. I took this one statue and multiplied it 5 more times. Just need to make bases for these little fellas, so I'll take a little cube and cut a little recess into it. Then take my shaper tool and bevel all the edges. This base needs a base to sit on, so I'll take this little platform shape, give it a little trim and stick it in place. Then just give it a lovely little hat, and then give that hat another lovely little hat. Stick that in my editing multiplier 5 more times, and pop the statue on top of the base, and that is jobbed. Now we can get to priming the lot. We'll take some matte Mod Podge and mix in some black acrylic paint to give us a sealing black primer to protect the foam. Then just delicately lean over and fart an entire layer of this primer all over the blue foam walls. It's always tricky knowing if the builds look any good when they're in their raw blue form, but usually as soon as they're all primed up, you get a pretty good indication whether it looks utter shite or pretty okay, and that is the level I aspire to. The last stage of the build phase is making the base. I have a random offcut of wood and should be big enough to place all the walls onto. At the back of the church is a few small steps that lead up to the little pool, so I'll stick some very thin slabs of blue foam together, forming a wide raised staircase platform. I then need to make an equal decagon shape, which I actually have no idea how to do as I haven't done geometry in like 15 years, so I looked up a handy tutorial on how to draw one. Turns out it's way more complex than I first thought, but now with my 10-sided shape, I can pin it to a foam sheet and cut it out. Then just got to do that 2 more times with a couple smaller ones to create a decagonic staircase. Punch out a little circle in the middle, and that can be where we put our watery pool. Give it a nice little ring for decoration, and that's our platform built. I mix some paint, Mod Podge and filler together to create an epoxy resin safe casing for when we come to add the water later. We're then back to creating brick texture, but more of a square flagstone vibe, using all the same methods as before on the walls to create our floor. The stairs have this little angled look to them, so I cut into the flat square to give it that shape and added some thin strips to raise the curb a little bit. I'm going to make a thick stodgy mud pie to cover the whole base using a mixture of polyfiller, Mod Podge brown paint and some sand, and in a very disgustingly looking approach to this section, just slap this horrific mess all over the wood and spread it about until satisfied. Prime the last foam bits with some more black Mod Podge mix, and we're good to start painting everything. To kickstart the painting process, I'll start off by doing a rough basing of grey all over the bricks. Nothing fancy, it's just a kind of dry brush attack but without wiping the excess paint off. I'm still aiming to retain black in the textures and the cracks, but getting a thicker coat than I normally would in a regular dry brush. Once our base has dried, I'm going to start adding some subtle earthy tones in, starting with a green glaze. I'm going to thin it down to a very watery consistency, then with a thick brush just start spreading this wash over corners and random pockets to add some natural variation and break up the monotonous grey. I often use umber and ochre tones in this bit, but the stone colour in the church is a lot cooler, and too many earthy tones will make the walls feel a bit too warm. It also helps when we come to adding flocking later, when we already have some soft green tones seeping into the stone already. I'll add a small amount of thin umber wash to little pockets on the walls just to break it up and add a small bit of variation, but not a huge amount as I don't want it feeling too earthy. Then I'll take some lighter grey and start whacking it on in a more regular dry brush fashion. Big wide rough strokes and wiping off excess paint before applying, just to add some highlights to the raised edges and higher up areas. The last wash of this section is a big slop of black wash all over everything. This will bring the bright tones down, but also blend all the greys, greens and browns together and feel much more cohesive. It'll also settle into the textures and give us some nice contrast. It's always good to have tissue on hand to mop up any pooling. We can finish off the painting of the walls and floors with a final light dry brush to bring another highlight layer in. This is going to give us a good contrast from the dark wash we just applied, and all the subtle tones should hopefully blend together quite nicely. On the grey-based statues, I'll slap a thin wash of Agrax Earthshade to give them a worn, grimy contrast. Then once that has dried, I'll give it a little bit of highlight dry brush, and there's our 6 statues done. We're now on to my favourite part of the build, flocking. Starting off with some static grass application, I'll get a whole basing of glue over the mud, and we'll begin with some 2mm autumnal grass. Then give it a big old shaking to evenly spread the grass everywhere. I'll mix in some dried grass, light browns and patchy yellow layers of static grass in some smaller sections to break up that nice rich green. In that little centre section by the stairs, I left it empty so I can grab some of this forest dirt path powder. It's got a nice blend of different earthy, stony tones and textures which look a lot more lifelike than most earth turf flock. Next up, I need to start adding some grass tufts and clump foliage into the flagstone gaps so we can get some nature breaking through the floor. I'll give a little sprinkling of burnt grass flock to beef up our grassy gribblies. Now for the fun bit, we can start decorating all the walls with different types of nature. And we'll begin with some more of the larger clump foliage and tuck it into the corners and cracks of the walls. It's also a very helpful way to cover up any mistakes you made along the way. I recently bought some of these flowering climbing vines, which I'm very excited to use as I think they look pretty cool. You just got to break out different strands from the big grouping and start stringing them from the top to the bottom of the walls to give that climbing vine effect. Now I really like these little vines, I think they look very realistic. And I'll basically take that step-by-step process and apply it to all the walls we have and all the arches to make them totally overgrown. I can also do this cute little wraparound on the pillars with the climbing vines as well, which I think is quite a fun little effect. So then just cue the montage of me adding copious amounts of flowers, weeds, moss to all the walls on both the inside and the outside. And with that done, here's our finished and dried base, and here are all the walls completely flocked out.
Well, it might not seem like a huge amount, but this has taken absolutely forever to complete. We've got all of our handmade bits finally done. We've got all of our little broken arches, every single wall built in with all the printed windows and everything. Normally we're doing walls and bricks and everything. You only really have to focus on one side of the wall, so it's taken double the amount of time because with the ruined church aspect, you see the walls on the outside and you see the walls on the inside. So it's taken me such a long time to just get to this point, but I'm actually pretty fucking thrilled with the outcome of all of these walls. They look so much better than previous walls that I've done using this method, and I think the climbing vines, which I recently bought, I think that's added a huge amount to the aesthetic of the ruined growth. Only thing that is, you might have noticed already, if you're a big Church of Vows fan, on the sort of back wall we have here, in the actual church there is a bell that sits on top, but one thing halfway through I kind of realised is that because I was using thin sheets, I basically only get one layer of brick on the wall, so like some bits have been padded out. It means that I wasn't able to sort of like build a sort of like arch cage kind of thing where the bell would sit. So I kind of just, decided to go with no bell, like a peace prize. I think we're pretty good and we're ready to move on to the assembling phase.
The next step is to start assembling it. I'm gonna just pop them on the base without glue first so I can see how it all looks together and space them out properly. Now that looks pretty god church. A perfect home for our little turtle dog. So let's get these walls all glued down and secured into place. Then pop all our statues in situ as well. Now, after getting all the walls stuck down, I remembered that our floor was square, so I need to trim off these corners that are sticking out beyond the walls. Then just fill those gaps with some more dirt flocking and some extra static grass. We can then add the larger plants and flocking to the build, starting with some large clumped foliage. For the biggest plants, we want to make some bushes and some trees. We'll need to grab some seafoam branches to begin. They come in very random shapes, so I need to clip the branches off so I can bundle them up together in a more bush-like shape. A little bit of hot glue around the base will keep them all secured together. I'll make a little foam block base that I can stick them into to be able to add some spray adhesive to the branches, which didn't end up working so well. But after some adhesive spray is applied, I can start dropping some of this lovely rich yellow leaf flock onto the branches to turn them into vibrant Elden Ring shrubbery. I ended up making 6 bushes before deciding I didn't like them very much and would rather just make some trees instead. I have some dried twigs left over from the Mugen train build, and I'll start gluing some seafoam branches onto it in a tree-like fashion. And with my tree-looking tree, I'll get my airbrush and prime it brown, trying to only hit the seafoam and leaving the tree trunk its own natural colour. Give it a little adhesive spray and start getting some of the vibrant yellow flocking applied to it. And there we have a collection of some lovely looking yellow trees. I'm going to add a bunch of ferns to bulk up all of the overgrown areas. And to get the trees firmly fixed into place, I have to drill some tree holes into the ground, which I can fill with some hot glue and just shove the trees into place and hold them till it dries. Then a couple cute little flower tufts can be dotted around the inside of the church for some final bits of cuteness. On to the last section of the build, which is everyone's favourite Pope, Miriel, freshly 3D printed. I'll leave a link in the description for where you can get your own Miriel to print. We'll start by priming him black and adding a full basing of dull brownish grey. I'll take an old wide dry brush to give some highlighting to the upper raised edges with some lighter grey. Now, I painted Miriel ages ago on the channel, but I based it off of a realistic turtle colour scheme. Now, Miriel is very old and is only really just a grey boy, so I'll try to keep it more in line with his actual colour scheme. So I'll add a mix of muted light brown to add a bit of variation to the shell. A very thin glazing of brown will add a bit of colour to his shell, but not too much colour, as I still want to keep him more in line with the game model. Now, whilst that glaze dries, I can start painting the cute little Pope hat. Painting white can be tricky at times, as you never want to start with pure white, so instead I'll start with a bone tone colour, which will be our darkest shade and base colour. I'll take a light bone tone shade and use this as our mid-tone, and this will go higher up the hat and sit more centrally in the previous base colour. The second to last colour is an off-white bone tone, which will go even further up the hat and sitting centrally in the previous colour to build up a nice transition between the 3 shades. Finally, we can add a pure white to it, which will be our extreme highlight at the top and in the tiny pocket left in the middle of the previous tone. Then I can take the off-white tone and bring it down to a very thin glaze and wash that over the harsh line transitions to smooth out those transitions. The body wash has dried by this point, so I'll go back over it with a thin black wash to bring those tones together and add a bit more contrast. While that dries, we can hop back to the hat to add some gold metallic paint to the little decals. Then add some final passes of progressively lighter greys and muted browns and bone tones. Tickle some black into the deep loving cosmic abyss that are Miriel's eyes. And we'll wrap up the painting with some final touches of black wash to the lower parts of the model, which will bring some more darker contrast back in, which we lost with some of the dry brushing. And that pretty much wraps up the entire process, which means all we have left to do is add some water to the pool, which we can do with some clear epoxy resin, mixed 50-50 with some resin hardener, give it a good stir and pour into the empty pool we made. Drop our little Miriel into position and finish off by painting the exposed edges of the base black.
Now, before we go on to the glamour shots, I'm bringing you something a little bit different. Have you ever had someone in your life who just accepts you for who you truly are? Someone who takes the bad with the good, the downright evil to the totally deplorable. Well, I wrote a country ballad, for some reason, about being the most villainous bastard in the lands between, but always having that one love who will truly accept you for the absolute piece of shit that you are. And for Elden Ring players, you can always count on Miriel.
Blood on my hands, runes in my pocket, killed Albinorics for the dime. Fed a blind girl grape, she seemed to like the taste till I told her to humanize. Killed my best friend Blythe just to see him die. Smash pot boys for the thrills. Signed Melanie's accord, then I burned her alive and gave a finger to the greater will.
I've burned trees and dead NPCs, left a tarnished land behind me. I'd ask for grace, but who would hear me now? Oh, Miriel, you're steady as a rock. Hard old shell and a big old heart. Big ass legs and a little pope hat. Ain't nobody built like that. Ain't no one forgive like that. I killed Nicola, Millicent, Radonna, Radagon, and Renala's children while she well. Killed Melania, Remote, my God, and Godfrey too. Murdered Fia while she slept. I defiled the defiler. His screams didn't make me blink. I caused a genocide inside a Jabba. Gave my friend Celivis his drinks. I've burned trees and dead NPCs, left a tarnished land behind me. I'd ask for grace, but who would hear me now? Oh, Miriel, you're steady as a rock. Hard old shell and a big old heart. Big ass legs and a little pope hat. Ain't nobody built like that. Ain't no one forgive like that. I know one day my ring will shatter. We'll be knee deep in the shit. And boiling prawns in our sheds while everybody's screaming. Oh, Miriel, you're steady as a rock. Hard old shell and a big old heart. Big ass legs and a little pope hat. Ain't nobody built like that. Oh, Miriel, you're steady as a rock. Hard old shell and a big old heart. Big ass legs and a little pope hat. Ain't nobody built like that. Ain't no one forgive like that.
Oh, good. Right. So that's Luke dancing. Well, that was different. If you enjoyed it, drop me a like in the name of our love and light Miriel. And if you hated it, send it to someone you think is downright deplorable and make them suffer like I made you. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please drop me a comment. Let me know what you thought of it. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. This project took a heck of a long time to put together, especially with that ridiculous song as well. Big shout out to Luke for helping me film the weirdest 3 minutes of this channel's history, which, for shits and gigs, I put on Spotify, so if you want to torture yourself or your friends further, you can stream it there. The link's in the description. Finally, a big shout out to all my lovely patrons who continuously support the channel and help projects like this come to life. You are the absolution this channel forever searches for. And with that, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.